welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny, and I like to talk about all things murdery, including murdery books. So today we're going to be talking about all of the books that I read in September. So let's get into it. We had a variety of hits and misses this month. Good variety of fiction and nonfiction. So let's go. All right, book number 1, Local Gone Missing by Fiona Barton. So I picked this book up. I did get it from the library, and I'm glad that I did and did not purchase this book. My mom recommended this book to me. She had read it, and somebody had recommended it to her. So people are liking this book. I am not one of those people. I did finish it. It was a little challenging for me to get through. I didn't feel like I connected to any of the characters. It's also told across multiple timelines, across multiple points of view, and in both third person and first person. And that just felt so messy and disjointed to me. I've read Game of Thrones, and if you want to talk about a mess of timelines and points of view, go read Game of Thrones. But this, I just didn't care about any of the characters. So this follows the story of a local man who goes missing, local gone missing, and the different people who have interacted with him, what happened to him, was he a good guy, was he involved in shady dealings? There's a police officer who's out on medical leave. She had breast cancer and is just so, she has to come back and solve this crime. So, I didn't like it. I didn't like the book. I always feel bad saying it, but it just, this one was not for me. My mom liked it. So there you go. Maybe you'll like it. It wouldn't be a starting place for me if you were looking for a book to read. Wouldn't be where I'd start. Okay, let's talk about a nonfiction. I'm going to try and bounce back and forth between fiction and nonfiction. The Yorkshire Ripper, The Secret Murders. So I am definitely in a phase of studying Peter Sutcliffe. So if you're not overly familiar with Peter Sutcliffe was a serial killer in England. His crimes spanned officially between 1975 and his arrest in 1981. Bad Jude killed many women and also left many women just permanently injured. One of the other books that I'm going to read that I'm going to talk about is the story of one of his survivors. So this was written by Chris Clark and Tim Tate. So Chris was an investigative journalist and Tim was a police officer. So they knew what was going on. They were part of the original investigations back in the 70s when this was going on. But what this book about is not just about the Yorkshire Ripper himself. So this is really about how poorly botched the police investigation was. And in fact, it was botched so badly. And frankly, so many women died who probably didn't need to because of how poorly run the investigation was. They identify in this at least 22 additional victims that they believe legitimately could be attributed to the Yorkshire Ripper. And three men went to prison for some of those crimes for years. So this book is more about that. This book is, if you are really interested in the Yorkshire Ripper, this is a great read, but I don't know if this is where I would start because it does give the foundation of his crimes, but it definitely assumes that you know a lot about the Yorkshire Ripper. Fortunately, I do know a fair amount about the Yorkshire Ripper already because I'm nerdy about it. Post the original investigation, the Crown, because again, this is in England, remember, requested an internal investigation. There was an investigator called Lord Byford who went out and did an internal investigation on the police force and on really why the investigation went so badly. Really the biggest problems they had is they got severe tunnel vision on certain situations. So, for example, they were absolutely convinced that the Yorkshire Ripper was only killing prostitutes, and that was just not true. He was targeting prostitutes in part because they were there. They were the most readily available. They'd get in his car, right? But he was attacking any woman who was by herself at night. If you were walking alone at night, the Yorkshire Ripper did not care if you were a prostitute or not. He would attack you. And in fact, according to this book, they speculate, again, none of these have been proven, but that he in fact attacked several men, and killed several men as well. So that was part of the tunnel vision. They weren't taking the eyewitness testimony of certain survivors seriously because they weren't prostitutes. So they were like, oh, you're not really a victim of the Yorkshire Ripper because you're not a prostitute. What? The other really big tunnel vision they got, there was a man who wrote several letters to the police and also submitted a audio tape. And they believed that it was legitimately from the Yorkshire Ripper. It was not. It was a copycat. It was somebody who was seeking fame, whatever his deal was. He was not arrested until I think 2003 or 2008. And again, this happened in the 70s. So way later, the man was identified and arrested. But they read these letters and got information from the letters. They were using that to match handwriting. The audio tape, they were using that to match his accent. They describe him as having a Geordie accent. I am not British, so I can't really tell you what that is, but I kind of liken it into saying somebody has a Boston accent or somebody has a Southern accent or somebody has a New York accent, something that would be distinct. So anybody who didn't have that handwriting, anybody who didn't have that accent, they were eliminating them. Peter Sutcliffe was interviewed by the Yorkshire police 9 times prior to his arrest. And every time, even if the police officers came back and said, I feel like this man is suspicious, they ultimately didn't pursue him because he didn't meet these other factors. And then he just kept killing. But the Byford report that came out afterward, I have been reading for a while now. It's dense and it's long, but it is just a mountain of information. And Lord Byford says in his report, we are sure there are other victims. And that is the basis of a lot of their information, is the Byford report. So if you, like me, are really into additional detail, you can see here, it says now a major TV documentary. It's on, I think it's on Netflix. And I have watched it. So if you don't want to read the book and you just want to watch the documentary, it was also good. So definitely recommend. This was a hit for me for sure. Okay, next up, another hit for me in the fiction category is Leigh Bardugo's Six of Crows. So this is part of the Grishaverse. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you have not read Shadow and Bone. So Shadow and Bone is the original trilogy that Leigh Bardugo wrote in this universe. So this is in the fantasy genre. It's kind of post-apocalyptic, which I love dystopian fiction. Anything that's post-apocalyptic, anything like that. I really like that. So Leigh Bardugo created this universe where certain people are born with certain types of magic. You're not just magical, you are specifically magical. So for example, you might be a squaller and you can control the wind, or like you're a fabricator and you can control metal and you create, you're going to build really cool tools and really cool weapons and things like that. So this follows the Grishaverse. If you have not read if you've not read Shadow and Bone, that original trilogy, which is also a Netflix series, by the way, now too, But if you've not read Shadow and Bone, I believe you can still read these fine. It's this, and then Six of Crooked Kingdom is the second book in this trilogy, or in this duology. I haven't read Crooked Kingdom yet. It's definitely on my October list. I did go get it from the library. I loved this. You can definitely read this without having read the Shadow and Bone series. I liked this better than Shadow and Bone, although I did like Shadow and Bone as well. But I liked this better than Shadow and Bone. It's kind of Ocean's 11-esque. So it follows this group of criminals. I mean, there's really no other way. It's a group of criminals, and they are trying to pull off this like massive heist. So if you watched the Netflix series, which is called Shadow and Bone, the word Six of Crows will not appear. It follows the Shadow and Bone storyline, but these characters appear in the show. When I watched the show originally, I had no idea that this was even a thing, and I was very confused. Like, oh, I read the books and I don't know who these people are. I don't remember the storyline. I liked it. I liked the addition of the storyline. I felt like it added a lot of depth to the story, but it wasn't in Shadow and Bone, so I was confused. And it wasn't until I heard about this that I realized they kind of combined. It doesn't follow the storyline that's in this book, but it follows the characters. But this was probably my favorite book that I read this month. Ooh, that's a tough call. I'm gonna have to think about it. The other book that would be a contender is so completely different. And I'll talk about that in a bit, but this was great. Definitely Six of Crows. Recommend it if you like fantasy fiction, if you like a good heist. Leigh Bardugo, Six of Crows. Read it. Ugh. And now for my biggest miss, and I just want you to see the disgust on my face. So, in line with all of my reading that I've been doing about Peter Sutcliffe, I picked up this book, and I'm going to use the word book here in the lightest of possible terminology. It's a pamphlet, and I'm offended, frankly, by this book. But it is about Scotland Yard. So when I was reading the Byford report that I was talking about before, they talk about the changes that were happening in the Metropolitan Police Force at the time, changes that were being made, and I didn't know anything about that, so I thought it would be really helpful for me to get some historical context about the Metropolitan Police Force, which is the same thing, by the way, as Scotland Yard. When you hear people say Scotland Yard, that's like the location. It is the Metropolitan Police Force. This book was awful. Just go read Wikipedia and you will get as good or better information. I started to read it. I did not finish it because it was so poorly done. And I really hate to say it, but this was just so poorly done that it's unforgivable in my opinion. I can appreciate that maybe I don't always like a storyline or something like that, but this was just lazily poorly done. Seriously, read Wikipedia and it is better. Here's where you really lost me. There is a typo in the title. The history of the world most famous police force. They put the apostrophe and they did not put the S in the title. Like if you have, I mean, I stopped reading this because the grammar and spelling errors were so egregious. I hadn't even noticed it in the title until I put it down and was like, what is this crap? And that's when I noticed there's a spelling error in the title. And that tells you, frankly, everything that you need to know. If I was not outside the return window, because I bought this on Amazon, if I was not outside the return window, I would return it. Do not read it. It's crap. Don't give these people any more money. Okay, next up, fiction again. All right. This one is Sarah J. Maas's Throne of Glass. So I apparently am behind the times on Sarah J. Maas. So I have never read any of her books before. I bought this book at least a year ago, maybe longer, because people know that I enjoy fantasy. I love a strong, badass female character. Like, yeah. So why would I not like this book, right? I didn't really. It was okay. I didn't hate it. I read it. I made it through it. But we have this, this is fantasy genre again, magical world. And it follows this woman. Her name is Selena. And look at her. I mean, this woman will kill you, right? Like, she looks just unbelievably badass. And she's, she's described in the book, and she describes herself, right? Like, she is an assassin. She will kill you as soon as look at you, right? I'm not going to tell you that she is weak. She's been in prison. When the book starts, she's in prison and they're getting her out of prison. So, I mean, she's not a weak character, but she definitely, when I think about a strong female character, like, she just does not fit the bill for me. I'll grant you, this is the first book of however many books that is that you see on the back here. So maybe she gets better. Maybe I should give it more time. I don't know. I think I'm going to probably abandon this series, though. Sarah J. Maas wrote another series called A Court of Thorns and Roses. And that seems to be more what I hear people talking about now than Throne of Glass. So I think I'm going to abandon this and read that series next instead. But to give you an example, they describe her as she's like this murderous assassin, right? Just complete badass. And she is like, I will kill you. Oh, Prince Dorian is cute. Hee hee hee. And I don't want to begrudge her love life, but she's so juvenile about it. And the character is 17, but she's this badass assassin, and there's just a lot of, oh, he's cute, giggling type of thing. And I just can't. I did read that Sarah J. Maas wrote this when she was in high school and college. So first of all, huge kudos to anybody who can write a book, especially that young. I've been wanting to write a book literally my entire life and never have. So huge kudos to her for that, for sure. And not only this book, but again, I mean, how many more are out there? So Sarah J. Maas, clearly a good writer. I am really hoping that her dialogue has matured, because there's just the dialogue is I think that's the thing I had a hard time getting past, was I felt like the dialogue was pretty juvenile. But the story itself was good, and her descriptions are good. I'm interested in the world that she's created, but I just couldn't get past that dialogue. So yeah, fingers crossed. I'm not ready to throw in the towel on Sarah J. Maas. I don't know that I'm going to continue the series, at least not right now. A Court of Thorns and Roses, I think I'll try that instead. So yeah, there you go on Throne of Glass. Okay, so there was a little pause in there. You may notice that it's a different time of day, and I am wearing different clothing, and nail polish, and also that my voice probably sounds different. So I pre-recorded while I was still in September, part of that video, because the library was wanting some of their books back. So in order for me to show them to you, I thought it would be helpful to have the physical copy, and I have now returned them. I was going to try and just make it look like I recorded it in all one foul swoop, but I was listening to what I already recorded, and I was still recovering from COVID when I recorded that, and I feel like my voice sounds very different. So it's a different time. It's like a week and a half later, and we're going to finish our September wrap up. Okay, I know I'm already running a little bit long, so I'm just going to keep going. Okay, the next book I have on here is A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Leigh. This is a book that I heard about from another YouTuber, and she is really into dark academia, which is I guess I'll call it a sub-genre that I wasn't previously very familiar with. And it sounded kind of interesting. So this follows a woman who is at a elite boarding school, as academia implies, and she has gone to this because she is researching witchcraft, and there was a group on campus 300 years before called the Dalloway Five, and they were all killed, or it's hard to kind of explain, but I don't want to, anyway, they all died. And it's kind of, were they killed? Did they commit suicide? Was there some sort of a murder-suicide pact? And this girl who, her best friend and girlfriend died the year before. So she is now back at school the year after her best friend / girlfriend has died. And it becomes, it's very unclear. It seems like it's very unclear in her own mind whether or not she killed her. So I felt like this book it was a little bit confusing. So I'm reading another dark academia book right now that this same YouTuber recommended. I'm feeling a little like dark academia is probably not going to be for me, mainly because I don't enjoy all of the angsty teenage crap. That's just not I'm bored with it after a while. Like, okay, I'm sorry that you have a lot of hormones, clearly. So there was this, I tabbed this because I did think it was a little bit interesting and basically sums up the book. So the girl is talking, her name is Ellis, and she's talking about how what she's going to do for her thesis. And she's basically describing it as she's going to talk about how depictions of mental illness are used to build suspense by introducing uncertainty and a sense of mistrust, especially with regard to the narrator's perception of events. And I feel like that sums the book up, honestly. You're never really sure. Ellis is your POV. She's your point of view. So, and she's really unclear about what happened. So you as the reader are very unclear for the most part about what is happening. So you're going to be confused because Ellis is confused, but it's definitely tons of murder, lots of murder happening. And I'll give it a 3. It was okay. It was definitely not a hit. It definitely wasn't a miss. It was full middle of the road. It was full middle of the road for me. Okay. Next up, I'm going to talk about a book that I listened to on audio. So I don't have a physical copy to show you, but that was Serial Killers, The Method and Madness of Monsters by Peter Vronsky. So I've read another book previously by Peter Vronsky. I do have a physical copy of the other one that I read, and you can see I tabbed the crap out of that one. This was American Serial Killers, The Epidemic Years, 1950 to 2000. I kind of wish I had read them in different order. He wrote Serial Killers, The Method and Madness of Monsters before he wrote this. And he referenced, that's what made me want to read his other book, is that he referenced it quite a bit in this book. I listened to it on audio and I thought it was excellent. I really think that he writes very, very well. He goes through a lot of the history of serial killers, so it's very educational. If you're interested in serial killers kind of as a concept or as a construct and not necessarily one individual serial killer, he does focus on different serial killers at a high level, but more about how they fit into organized versus disorganized serial killers, or he even goes into what to do if you are ever captured by a serial killer, which, good tips, but apparently you have something like a 3% chance of escaping. It's not great odds. And he talks about his own experiences where he, at some point in his life, knows for sure that he encountered 2 different serial killers at different points. So kind of just talks about how prevalent serial killers are. How likely are you to encounter a serial killer. So I did listen to it on audio, and I will say I enjoyed it, but I wish I had the physical copy of it, because there's a lot of statistics and I a lot of lists and things like that I would have liked to have been tabbing, honestly, from an academic standpoint. So definite hit for me. This one was, I'm pointing at this one, it's not the actual book, but Serial Killers, The Method and Madness of Monsters, Peter Vronsky, definitely a hit for me. He has other books that I have now on my wish list that I will be reading. I'm sure at some point I will read everything that Peter Vronsky has written. Okay, next up, Kingdom of the Cursed by Kerri Maniscalco. So this was actually a reread for me because Kerri Maniscalco has written a trilogy. It's Kingdom of the Wicked is the first, Kingdom of the Cursed, and then she just released a few days ago anyway, Kingdom of the Feared. So if you watched my October TBR, you saw me get excited about this. I still haven't read it yet. I had a craft show over the weekend, so I was gone all weekend. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but it's probably going to be my first physical book that I intend to read. I am working my way through some audiobooks right now too, but this will probably be my first physical read this month, Kingdom of the Feared. But in preparation, kind of just a refresher, I reread Kingdom of the Cursed. So this is the second book in the trilogy for Kerri Maniscalco. I've read everything else that Kerri Maniscalco has ever written. This is her sixth book. Kingdom of the Feared is her seventh. Her other series that she wrote is called Stalking Jack the Ripper. These fall into the YA category. I have kind of learned that there is a little bit of a push to kind of cross over YA and kind of create a new adult, not just a young adult, but a new adult category. And I feel like Kerri Maniscalco is evidence of the need for that category. Her characters are in the 17, 18-year-old range. And I feel like if you start talking about a young adult as being 13 or 14 versus 18 or 19, different, right? You're in a different place. Hopefully, I hope you are. So to give you an example, in Stalking Jack the Ripper, the opening scene is the lead character performing a pretty graphic autopsy, and it's clear what she's doing, right? There is no dumbing it down for us. In these books, what is happening is our main character, Amelia, is trying to figure out who murdered her sister, her twin sister, and the description of said murder is, again, very graphic. Something that I probably wouldn't have wanted to read. I mean, honestly, I don't want to read it now, but I definitely would have been pretty traumatized probably when I was 13. Something that might have fallen in that young adult category. So anyway, I love Kerri Maniscalco. I really like how she writes. Her books are easy to read. Compared to especially Stalking Jack the Ripper, these ones are getting a little bit smutty. I'll call it smutty. It's definitely not, a traditional romance novel in that kind of thing, but it's more so though than some of the others that I've read. So of hers. But anyway, these are a definite hit for me. Again, this was a reread, so definitely I liked it or I wouldn't have reread it. All right. That's the end of my normal normal book read. I did read one other book this month, and I also don't have a physical copy of that because I listened to it on Audible, or not Audible, but on audiobook, is The Party Crasher by Sophie Kinsella. So The Party Crasher is Sophie Kinsella's latest book. I don't think I've read everything she's written, but I've read most of her other books. People may be familiar with Confessions of a Shopaholic. They turned the first 3 books in that series. She wrote Confessions of a Shopaholic, takes Manhattan, Shopaholic gets married, Shopaholic has a baby. Like, it's a long series. After a while, I was over it. But they turned the first 3 books into a movie starring Isla Fisher. It was catastrophically awful. Do not watch the movie. But the books were funny. I read them mainly in my early 20s when I think I related a little bit more. But over time, one of the challenges for me with that series is you kind of want the character to mature and learn from her mistakes. And I felt like she was just making the same mistakes over and over. And after a while, that's just annoying. My favorite Sophie Kinsella book is called Can You Keep a Secret? Which I recently discovered they also turned into a movie. It's on Netflix. Can You Keep a Secret? And it's cute. The book was so much better though, than the movie was. They just have not done kindly to her, in the movie genre. Probably one of the biggest disappointments to me is that, Sophie Kinsella is a British writer. All of her books, for the most part, are set in London. And for whatever reason, when they translate these into movies, they must set them in New York, even though Americans love the British. So I don't know why you can't just set it in England. Like, we would still watch it. More people would watch it. We like the accents. But anyway, this book, not in the tiniest little bit murdery. It is pure fluff. I think it falls into a genre I've heard called chick lit. Not chick lit, but chick lit, like chick literature. Anyway, pure fluff. But honestly, after all of the murdery books that I've been reading and watching the Dahmer series, I needed some fluff. So still really enjoy Sophie Kinsella. She's funny, but she's still heartwarming. Like, you kind of take these ridiculous characters who are just making awful, horrible decisions, and you kind of want to shake them. But by the end, you just want to give them a hug and you love them and they make you laugh. And it's feel good. It's feel good. So anyway, there you go. That's everything that I have read in the month of September. Getting cracking on my October list now. And then we'll report back there. So thank you if you made it this far. I know this video has run a little bit long. But as always, if you can like, comment, and subscribe, that helps me so much. I would really appreciate it. Also, always, as always, have fun, be safe, and don't murder anyone. Bye.